In the bustling town of Onitsha, Amarachi left her humble farmer husband, Obina, to chase wealth and status. Years later, she invites him to her lavish wedding, hoping to humiliate him in front of the whole town. But when Obina arrives, the tables turn in a way no one expected. This is the unforgettable tale of pride, betrayal, and destiny's revenge, the invitation. Once upon a time, in the crowded town of Onitsha, there lived a woman named Amarachi. Amarachi was known for two things, her sharp tongue and her love for appearances. To her, respect was measured by the number of chairs you rented at a party, and the price tag of your ISO EB. She liked to shine, even if her pockets were empty at the end of the day. But before all the lace gowns, before the gold-plated handbags, Amarachi had once been married to Obina. Back then, Obina was nothing more than a poor farmer's son. He had calloused hands, bent from years of tilling the soil, and a face darkened by sun and sweat. He was gentle in spirit, but rough in tongue. Worst of all, Amarachi would say, "He cannot even speak English like a man." To her friends, she called him the village illiterate. At first, she stayed because he provided food, shelter, and quiet love. But as the years went on, her pride began to choke her. Whenever her friends gathered with their rich, educated husbands, she would shrink in her chair, embarrassed. One night, after yet another quarrel about his lack of ambition, Amarachi spat the words that would end it all. "You will die in poverty, Obina, and I refuse to die with you." The very next morning, she packed her clothes into a Ghana must-go bag, left his mud house behind, and swore never to look back. Years passed. Amarachi's beauty caught the eye of a wealthy businessman, Chief Ebuka. He owned filling stations, drove jeeps, and spoke fluent English that rolled off his tongue like music. To Amarachi, it was her ticket out of shame. Chief Ebuka proposed, and Amarachi, now feeling like she had finally leveled up, began planning the wedding of the year. There would be chandeliers, there would be live band singers from Lagos, and above all, there would be guests, important ones. Amarachi made sure her wedding would make noise loud enough for the whole town to hear, but somewhere deep in her heart, there was still a thorn, a memory, a shadow in the form of Obina, the illiterate farmer she left behind. Her friends often reminded her, "Make sure he knows you made it. Let him see what a real man looks like." So Amarachi did something strange. She sent him an invitation, yes, to her own wedding. Her plan was simple: drag his name in silent humiliation. Let the crowd whisper, "So this is the useless man she left. Look at him now, still poor, still dirty." When Obina received the invitation, he sat quietly on a wooden stool outside his rebuilt family house. His neighbors laughed at the gold-trimmed envelope. "What will you wear, your raffia hat?" one mocked. Another added, "Don't go and disgrace yourself, she only wants people to laugh." But Obina said nothing. He just stared at the paper, his lips pressed into a thin line. Then slowly he folded it carefully and placed it inside his Bible. The night before the wedding, Amarachi stood in front of her mirror, adjusting her diamond earrings. She smiled wickedly. "Tomorrow," she whispered, "the world will know who is truly blessed." What Amarachi did not know was that tomorrow held a surprise she could never imagine. The sun rose early that Saturday, painting the sky with streaks of orange and gold. In the town of Onitsha, everyone was already buzzing. Amarachi's wedding was the talk of the market, the churches, even the motor park. Traders closed their stalls early. Taxi drivers polished their cars, hoping to get hired by one of the important guests. At the grand event hall near the riverside, decorators had worked through the night. Golden drapes hung from the ceiling. The floor gleamed so bright, you could see your reflection in it. At the entrance stood a giant arch made of fresh roses, and on the red carpet, ushers in sparkling uniforms rehearsed their greetings. Amarachi arrived like a queen. She stepped down from a white limousine, her lace gown glittering in the morning sun. Her bridesmaids carried her train. As photographers screamed for shots, guests clapped. Her face glowed with pride. "Today," she whispered under her breath, "is the day I bury my shame." Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Obina prepared quietly. His neighbors were shocked when they saw him come out of his gate. No longer did he wear the torn singlet and old slippers they remembered. He was dressed in a sharp native attire, royal blue agbada with silver embroidery. His shoes shone, his walking stick gleamed. But what made mouths drop was the car that pulled up in front of his house. It wasn't a rickety taxi. It was a sleek black SUV with tinted windows, followed by 2 more cars behind it. Drivers stepped out in matching uniforms. The whole street froze. "Obina!" an old woman gasped. "Since when?" Obina said nothing. He simply adjusted his cap, entered the car, and the convoy drove away, leaving a trail of whispers. Back at the wedding, Amarachi mingled with senators, businessmen, and city women who wore gear so high it brushed the chandeliers. She laughed loudly, enjoying the envy in their eyes. Every detail of the event screamed wealth. The MC cracked jokes, the live band sang praises, and Chief Ibuka, her soon-to-be husband, smiled proudly. Then, just as the pastor was about to begin, the sound of engines echoed outside. The noise grew louder. Guests turned their heads toward the entrance. 3 black SUVs rolled up the red carpet. The doors opened in unison. Bodyguards in dark suits stepped out. Behind them, slowly, Obina emerged. At first, silence fell. Some guests squinted, trying to recognize him. Others whispered, "Isn't that Amarachi's ex, the farmer, the one she called an illiterate?" But the man walking in was no longer the bent villager with dusty feet. His agbada flowed like a river of royalty. A gold wristwatch glistened on his arm. His steps were steady, commanding. The hall grew so quiet, you could hear the cameras clicking. Amarachi, standing at the altar, froze. The smile on her lips stiffened. Her hand trembled slightly as she clutched her bouquet. "Impossible," she muttered under her breath. But it was possible. Obina had come. And from the look in his eyes, he hadn't come to bow his head in shame. The crowd leaned forward, eager to know what would happen next. The ushers, trained to smile no matter what, forgot themselves. Their mouths hung open, as Obina strolled past them like a man who owned the place. The cameras, meant to capture Amarachi's big day, turned sharply, clicking furiously at the unexpected guest. Whispers rose like a wave. "Is that not Obina? The farmer she left? Since when does he move with bodyguards?" Inside, Chief Ibuka shifted uneasily. He had never met Obina, but the way the man walked, steady, confident, eyes locked on no one, and everyone at the same time, commanded respect. The MC cleared his throat, tried to break the tension with a joke, but even his microphone trembled in his hands. Amarachi's chest tightened. This was not the picture she had painted in her mind. She had imagined Obina walking in with dusty sandals, head bent in shame, maybe wearing a borrowed shirt. She had seen herself smirking, whispering to her friends, "That was my past." But this Obina was not poor. This Obina was not broken. He looked like a man who had dined with kings. He took a seat in the front row, unbothered by the stares. A bodyguard leaned close, whispered something, then quietly slipped out to take a call. The efficiency of it all made people's heads spin. Who was this man now? The pastor tried to continue, but the hall was restless. Guests were no longer watching the bride. Their eyes were on the man who had stolen the spotlight without saying a single word. Amarachi's best friend, seated at the bridal train, leaned close and hissed, "You didn't tell us he changed?" Amarachi forced a smile through gritted teeth. He's pretending, he must be pretending. But deep down, her stomach twisted. There was no pretending in the way the guard stood tall. No pretending in the way the guests whispered his name with new respect. No pretending in the way even Chief Ibuka's business partners kept glancing at him, as if trying to place his face. Obina remained calm, his expression unreadable. But his eyes occasionally lifted to Amarachi. And when they did, she felt naked. It was not the gaze of a man who begged. It was the gaze of a man who knew something. Chief Ibuka leaned toward her. "That's your ex?" he asked in a low voice. Amarachi swallowed hard. He was nothing. He's still nothing. But even as she said it, her voice shook. Because everyone in that hall could see it. Obina was not nothing. The choir began to sing again, but the atmosphere had changed. The wedding Amarachi designed to disgrace her past was slowly slipping out of her control. And she hadn't even heard the worst yet, because Obina had not come alone. He had come carrying a truth that would tear the hall apart. Eyes kept darting toward Obina, who sat like a silent storm in the front row. Even the cameraman, hired to film Amarachi's every smile, could not resist stealing shots of him. Amarachi's palms were sweating inside her gloves. She kept forcing her lips into a smile, but her thoughts were racing. What is he doing here? Why does he look so different? When the pastor finally declared, "You may now kiss the bride," the applause was weak, scattered. The true show was not at the altar, it was in the pews. At the reception, the tension snapped. The MC tried to liven the hall with jokes and praise songs, but midway through his banter, one of Obina's men approached him and handed him a folded card. The MC frowned, opened it, and nearly dropped the microphone. He looked up at Obina, who gave him the smallest nod. Clearing his throat, the MC said, "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a surprise guest who wishes to speak." The hall erupted. Some gasped, some clapped, others craned their necks eagerly. Amarachi's eyes widened in horror. He walked to the stage, every step echoing on the marble floor. The spotlights caught his agbada, making it shimmer. He took the microphone slowly, letting the silence thicken. "Good evening," he said, his voice deep and calm. "I am honored to be here today." The crowd leaned forward. Amarachi's heart pounded like a drum. Obina glanced at her once and then turned to the guests. "Years ago, a woman left me because I was poor. She said I was finished, that I would never rise. She called me names that cut deep: illiterate, failure, burden." A ripple went through the audience. People turned their eyes to Amarachi, who sat frozen, her smile gone. Obina continued. "What she didn't know was that while she mocked me, I was building. I started with nothing but a will to work. I tilled the soil, yes, but then I learned how to trade the harvest. I learned how to move goods across borders. I studied, not in classrooms, but in the market, in the ports, in the midnight hours when others slept." He paused. The hall was silent, hanging on every word. "Today, by the grace of God, I am no longer the man she left behind. I am the founder of Obicorp Holdings, an empire that employs thousands across this nation. The trucks that delivered your drinks today? Mine. The decorators that lit this hall? Mine. Even the security watching your cars outside?" He smiled faintly. "Mine." The room exploded with gasps. Phones came out. Fingers flew across screens, searching his name. Sure enough, headlines appeared. Obina Okafor, CEO of Obicorp Logistics, net worth in billions. Chief Ibuka's face turned pale. Amarachi could not breathe. And Obina. He just handed back the microphone, bowed slightly, and returned to his seat. But the night was not finished with Amarachi. The real shock was still crawling toward her, like fire under dry leaves. The hall buzzed, like a disturbed beehive. Guests whispered, phones flashed, and the name Obina Okafor flooded social media within minutes. Hashtags were already trending. The billionaire X, tables turned. Amarachi sat stiffly in her golden chair, her makeup cracking under the weight of sweat. The plan she had nurtured for months, inviting Obina to watch her rise, had twisted into something unrecognizable. Instead of mocking him, she had handed him the stage. Chief Ibuka leaned toward her, his jaw clenched. "You didn't tell me this man was Obina Okafor. Amarachi, do you know who he is?" Her throat went dry. I didn't know." But Chief Ibuka was already pulling his arm away. His eyes were full of calculation, doubt, and anger. The hall could feel the shift. Then came the final dagger. One of Obina's associates whispered to the MC again. The MC, trembling but excited, announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Obina has one more gift for the couple." Gasps. Amarachi almost collapsed. "Gift?" she muttered. Obina rose once more, walked calmly to the stage, took the microphone. His eyes swept the hall, then rested on Amarachi. His voice was steady, but this time there was steel beneath the calm. "Amarachi once told me I would die a poor illiterate. She said I could never stand among men of wealth. She was right about one thing: I was poor. But poverty was never my destiny. Today I stand not to shame her, but to thank her. Her rejection was the fire that forged me. If she had stayed, maybe I would have remained small. But when she walked away, I learned to rise." The hall broke into applause. Some guests even stood, clapping. Amarachi's chest heaved. Then Obina added, "As for my gift, this hall, the Crystal Pavilion, belongs to Obicorp. Every event held here pays into my pocket. Today, Amarachi, you wanted me to sit and feel shame in your presence. Instead, you are celebrating your marriage in my building." The hall exploded. Shouts, gasps, screams. People jumped to their feet. Cameramen zoomed in on Amarachi's stunned face as her bouquet slipped from her trembling hands. Chief Ibuka's expression darkened. He rose, whispered something to his best man, and stormed out of the hall. Guests followed with murmurs, some laughing, some pitying. The dream wedding was unraveling before Amarachi's eyes. She sat frozen, her world collapsing in slow motion. The same Obina she once spat on, the same man she called illiterate, was the very foundation on which her wedding stood. Obina handed the mic back, bowed slightly to the pastor, and walked out with his guards. No gloating, no insults. Just the quiet dignity of a man who had already won. And as the convoy of black SUVs drove away, Amarachi's eyes filled with tears. Not tears of joy, not even tears of anger, but the bitter sting of regret. She had tried to disgrace her past, only to discover her past had become her future's shadow. The crowd would talk for months. The headlines would last for years. But for Amarachi, one truth would never leave her. She invited her poor, illiterate ex-husband to her wedding to disgrace him, and got the shock of her life. And so Amarachi learned the hardest lesson of all, that pride blinds and destiny never forgets. She invited her past to laugh at him, but her past walked in as her future's shadow. Stories like this remind us, never despise small beginnings, because the person you mock today might be the one who owns the very ground you stand on tomorrow. If this story moved you, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs the lesson, and subscribe for more African folk tales that teach, inspire, and stay in the heart.